The Fox, the Owl, and the Storm. Once upon a time, in the peaceful heart of Greenwood Forest, lived a clever fox named Rilo. He was admired by many for his wit, charm, and quick tongue. Whenever animals had questions, they came to Rilo. He always had an answer, sometimes true, sometimes clever, sometimes just loud enough to sound right. But in the highest tree of the forest lived an old owl named Aura. She rarely spoke, but when she did, the forest fell silent. Aura was not just wise, she was thoughtful. She listened more than she talked, and when she spoke, her words echoed in the minds of animals for days. Rilo didn't care much for Aura. "She's boring," he'd say with a smug grin. "All she does is stare and blink. What's the use of wisdom if you don't share it?" Many animals laughed and nodded, amused by the fox's playful words. One summer evening, dark clouds rolled in faster than usual. The forest, warm and golden with sunset, turned cold and gray. The birds stopped singing. The wind whispered warnings through the trees. A storm was coming, one unlike any the forest had seen in years. Rilo stood on a rock and addressed the animals gathered in the clearing. "Friends, the rain is near, but worry not. I've seen plenty of storms. Follow me. I know a dry den beneath the hill. We'll all be safe there." Many nodded. "Rilo is brave," whispered the hedgehog. "He always has a plan," said the rabbit. But not everyone moved. From above, Aura watched silently. A young badger named Luma looked up and called, "Aura, what should we do?" Aura blinked once. Slowly, she turned her head and said only, "The river speaks before the rain." The animals looked at each other, confused. Rilo laughed. "What does that mean? Riddles in a time of danger. That's not helpful. Come, everyone, let's go to the hill." Most of the animals followed Rilo. The storm hit hard. Wind howled. Trees bent and groaned. The hill Rilo led them to offered shelter, but only briefly. The rain grew fierce, and the hill began to flood. The dry den Rilo spoke of had collapsed years ago. Water rushed in, soaking fur, feathers, and spirits. The younger animals began to panic. The moles squeaked. The squirrels huddled together, cold and scared. Rilo's confidence cracked. I didn't know the den was gone," he muttered. Lightning struck a nearby tree, and everyone screamed. Meanwhile, in the higher branches, Aura had flown to the old cave beneath the northern cliff, a place she had visited for decades, but never spoken of. She had led a few animals there. Luma the badger, a family of field mice, 2 sparrows, and a deer with a limp. The cave was dry. The walls were thick. The wind barely touched them. Inside, Luma turned to Aura and whispered, "You knew this would happen." Aura replied calmly, "I listened to the river. It swelled before the sky darkened. The forest speaks, if we're quiet enough to hear." Back on the hill, water reached the knees of the smallest animals. Rilo tried to rally them. "We must move back to the trees." But the trees now swayed dangerously. Branches snapped. A raccoon nearly fell as he climbed. In the chaos, Rilo's voice was no longer trusted. His words, once confident, now sounded hollow. "Where do we go?" shouted a panicked foal. Then someone cried, "Find the owl, Aura will know." And just like that, the animals began to scatter, braving the wind to reach the cliff. Hours later, soaked and shivering, the last group of animals stumbled into Aura's cave. She said nothing at first, just gave space and quiet. Rilo, drenched and ashamed, entered last. He sat by the wall and didn't speak. By morning, the storm had passed. The sun rose gently over Greenwood, shining on broken branches, wet nests, and puddles the size of ponds. In the cave, the animals stirred. Ora stood at the mouth, watching the light return. Rilo walked up beside her. "I was wrong," he said softly. "I spoke before I listened. I led them into danger because I wanted to be clever, not careful." Ora turned to him, her amber eyes kind. "Wisdom," she said, "is not in knowing everything. It's in knowing when to wait and when to listen." In the days that followed, the forest began to heal. Rilo was still clever, still quick-witted, but something had changed. When animals asked questions, he paused, he thought. Sometimes he even said, "I don't know." And whenever he wasn't sure, he'd look up to the tallest tree and listen for the rustle of feathers. True wisdom is not in how fast you speak, but in how deeply you listen.